Battle of Gettysburg was fought from July 1st to July 3rd in 1863 in and around the town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, by Union and Confederate forces during the American Civil War. The Civil War, spanning from 1861 to 1865, was caused by decades of political controversy surrounding the issue of slavery. Newly elected President Abraham Lincoln opposed slavery, eventually leading to the succession of 11 southern states from the Union, forming the Confederacy. The Battle of Gettysburg was a major battle during the American Civil War in 1863, and Pickett's charge completely altered the direction of the war in favor of the North. Confederate General Robert E. Lee led his troops north for the second time, seeking the Union troops while his 75,000-man army was in good spirits. The fields of Pennsylvania are a fresh look for the men in comparison to the war-struck Virginia land they've been used to. June 15th, 3 corps of Lee's army crossed the Potomac River, and by June 28th, they have reached the Susquehanna River in Pennsylvania. Lee is losing precious time while waiting for an updated position on the Union troops from his cavalry commander, General Jeb Stuart, until a spy informs Lee that Meade and his Union troops are nearby. Lee then orders his army to Gettysburg, as the major local road can be very advantageous. Union General Joseph Hooker is also going north, but intends to steer away from engaging with Lee after their humiliating defeat at Chancellorsville. President Lincoln was heavily concerned with his evasiveness, and ultimately Hooker was replaced by Major General George Meade in late June. Meade moves his men northward still, keeping to his orders to stay in between Lee and Washington, D.C. He pursues Lee, but the capital is his main concern. The two armies officially collided in Gettysburg on July 1st, 1863, as Lee packed his forces there, intending to engage with the Union army there and destroy it. Low ridges to the northwest of the town were defended initially by a Union cavalry division under General John Buford, and soon reinforced with 2 corps of Union infantry led by General Reynolds. General John Reynolds was a well-respected general during this battle, but he was mortally wounded while leading his men into the front line. He was hit with a musket mini-ball in the back of the head while having his back turned. Looking back at his men and screaming, John's last words were, "Forward, men, forward, for God's sake, and drive those fellows out of the woods." He died before hitting the ground while falling from his horse. Meanwhile, 2 large Confederate corps assaulted them from the northwest and the north, collapsing the hurriedly assembled Union lines, sending their defenders retreating through the streets of the town to the hills just to the south. The Confederate forces who fought this day were under Hill's corps, so it is difficult to separate the casualties because they were heavily involved in the last day battle of Pickett's charge, where the Confederates lost a lot of their army and men. The Union had about 18,000 men during this first battle and lost or wounded over half of them. On the second day of battle, the Union defended a fishhook-shaped range of hills and ridges south of Gettysburg. The Confederates wrap around the Union position in a longer line. That afternoon, Lee launches a heavy assault commanded by Lieutenant General James Longstreet in the Union left flank. Fierce fighting rages at Devil's Den, Little Round Top, the Wheat Field, the Peach Orchard, and Cemetery Ridge as Longstreet's men close in the Union position. Using their shorter interior lines, Union 2 Corps Commander Major General Winfield Hancock and the others move reinforcements quickly to blunt Confederate advances. One group of reinforcements was the 20th Maine, led by Joshua Chamberlain, who led a monumental bayonet charge on the side of Little Round Top to combat the last wave of Confederates coming up the hill. The Union needed to protect the hill because if the Confederates took the hill, they could have destroyed the entire Union line, ending the Battle of Gettysburg right there. A key detail in this call for the bayonet charge was to combat the Confederates with no ammunition. Lee was confident the enemies were weakened, and wanted to capitalize on their recent success with fresh attacks in the center of the Union line. Heavy fighting resumes on Culp's Hill, as Union troops attempt to recapture ground lost the previous day. Cavalry battles flare to the east and south, but the main event is a dramatic infantry assault by 12,500 Confederates against the center of the Union position on Cemetery Ridge. Though undermanned, the Virginia Infantry Division of Brigadier General George E. Pickett constitutes about half of the attacking force. Lee ordered Pickett to advance his division towards the enemy through a mile of unprotected farmland. Before the foot soldiers advanced out of the protected woods, the Confederate artillery fired for hours trying to break off the Union guns on the Union line. There was a miscommunication with orders because they were supposed to keep enough ammunition to support the foot soldiers' assault. During Pickett's charge, as it is famously known, only one Confederate brigade temporarily reached the top of the ridge. Afterward, referred to as the high water mark of the Confederacy, this daring strategy ultimately proves a disastrous sacrifice for the Confederates, with casualties approaching 60%. Repulsed by close-range Union rifle and artillery fire, the Confederates retreated. Lee withdraws his army from Gettysburg late on the rainy afternoon of July 4th and trudges back to Virginia with severely reduced ranks of wasted on the battle-scarred men. This battle was a turning point in the Civil War because the Confederates' loss equaled 60% of their men in just one battle, causing them to retreat out of the North and back into the South. This loss would start the fall of the Confederacy. Before Gettysburg, the South was in control with their back-to-back battle wins at Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville. After Pickett's charge, Union Commander George Meade was relieved of his duty due to him not following the Confederates during their retreat from Pickett's charge. Lincoln would then appoint Ulysses S. Grant for the position of Union General. Grant would then lead a 47-day attack on Vicksburg, leading to the town's surrender. The main point to capturing Vicksburg was to lead the Union to capturing the Mississippi River, which metaphorically split the South into two, causing it to be harder to supply their troops with necessary supplies. All of this spanning from the major win during Pickett's charge. This battle earned the name of Pickett's Charge because more than half of the men making the assault came from under the leadership of Brigadier General George Pickett. Pickett and his division arrived at Gettysburg after the first and second days of fighting. With his men being the most fresh out of everyone in the Confederate Army at that point in the battle, General Lee decided to use his men to lead the big assaults of all the Union positions. Although Pickett wasn't leading his men the whole 1 mile over open ground, the attack was still named after him for the bravery of his men during the attack. He lost almost half of his men during this attack, including wounding and dead, with his casualties amounting about 42% of his men. Without Pickett and his men's courage, the entirety of the Civil War could have ended much differently.